visits to protect our loved ones. To increase emergency capacity and containment efforts in long-term care homes, we are providing $243 million in surge capacity, as well as round-the-clock screening, more staff for sanitation, and essential personal protective equipment. We are investing a further $125 million to improve the facilities and quality of care. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know that everyone here in this House and across the province have taken comfort from the expertise of our public care officials. Our public health officials have made the difference in terms of making sure that we understand on an hourly basis what is going on and what we need to do. I especially want to thank Dr. David Williams, our Chief Medical Officer, and the other 35 local Chief Medical Officers across the province for their hard work. We have given public health units across the province certainty by maintaining their funding. And today, I'm pleased to say that we will invest an additional $160 million in increased funding for urgent public health needs. This includes investments in virtual care and Telehealth Ontario, which will free up space in our hospitals. As this pandemic unfolds, we need to be flexible and prepared, whatever the situation. So we have set aside a $1 billion dedicated COVID-19 response contingency to fund whatever needs come up over the course of this outbreak. This situation is changing day to day and hour to hour. It is difficult to imagine how tired our frontline healthcare providers must be. Again, on behalf of this legislature, I want you all to know that we are so proud of you, and you can count on us to make sure that you have the resources you need. Everyone across the province is doing their part to protect themselves, their families, their communities, and our health sector, staying home and self-isolating. And our business community is stepping up as well. Distilleries and breweries across Ontario are making antiseptic hand gel. An education technology company in Kitchener called Inksmith is organizing people with 3D printers to print scarce plastic components for important medical shields. Back Alley Burrito in Strathroy is feeding frontline healthcare workers and giving gift cards to first responders. We are grateful for everyone across Ontario who is showing that Ontario spirit. As part of our plan, we are investing $3.7 billion to provide immediate and direct support for Ontario's people and employers. It starts with those most in need. To our vulnerable seniors, we will provide $75 million in relief by doubling the maximum guaranteed annual income system payment for 6 months, starting next month in April. This means 194,000 of our lowest income seniors will receive up to $166 for individuals and $332 for a couple per month to cover essential expenses. We're also allocating $5 million to help with subsidized delivery of meals, medicines, and other necessities. Mr. Speaker, supporting our most vulnerable communities is at the heart of so much of what we must do in this difficult time. We are investing $52 million to expand the emergency assistance program through Ontario Works. This provides support for those facing the most serious financial difficulties. We're directing $148 million to our municipal partners so that they can fund charities, not-for-profits, who include homeless shelters, food banks, and religious organizations that support our communities. In fact, as we work with our municipal partners to help slow the spread of COVID-19, we will be providing nearly $250 million of direct support to assist municipalities. We are allocating $26 million in enhanced support for Indigenous communities to fund prevention and awareness efforts and to respond to the needs of remote and isolated communities. Mr. Speaker, schools and daycares being closed has made life more difficult for families across Ontario. It's exhausting for parents to find the balance at the best of times. During these exceptional times, they need some extra help. Today, we are announcing that our government will provide parents direct financial support and relieve the burden we know parents are facing as a result of COVID-19. We will make a one-time payment to families of $200 for every child under 12 and $250 for every special needs child, part of this $336 million investment. Now, I know that this does not solve all the problems, but it will provide parents with some relief. Now, as you know, many parents are also on the front lines of battling COVID-19. These moms and dads are called to serve, and they leave their families to make sure that you and I and all Ontarians are protected. That's why we are providing round-the-clock childcare for 56,000 of these essential workers, so they have one less worry when they go to work. We're suspending OSAP loan payments until September 30th, and there will be no new interest during that period. We're working with labour leaders to find ways to support apprentices in terms of gaining new skills. And, Mr. Speaker, we are providing $100 million through Employment Ontario for skills training programs for those whose livelihoods have been affected by COVID-19. Now, the Premier has promised Ontario workers that we will have their backs, and we do. With all-party support, we recently passed a bill immediately providing job-protected leave to employees in isolation or those who need to be away from work to care for children. I want to thank all the members of this legislature for working together to pass this critical piece of legislation. I've spoken to business leaders across Ontario, and I'm heartened to hear all that they are doing under these very difficult circumstances to support their employees. And as a government, we will support Ontario's businesses. The most pressing need for employers right now is cash flow. They need to meet their immediate costs in the short term, to keep the lights on and to keep their employees at work. That's why we are making available $10 billion to support cash flow for people and businesses. We are cutting taxes by $355 million so that over 50,000 employers, by a proposed cut to the rate of the employer health tax and raising the exemption to $1 million for 2020. This means that nearly 90% of Ontario businesses will not pay that tax this year. We are also providing a 5-month interest and penalty-free grace period for businesses to file or pay most provincially administered taxes. Mr. Speaker, this will keep $6 billion in the Ontario economy. And by the WSIB allowing premiums to be deferred for 6 months, employers will be provided with another $1.9 billion of relief. My colleagues and I have been speaking to mayors across Ontario. They've told us that one important step that we could take to support them will be allowing municipalities to defer paying school taxes. Doing this would enable them to defer collecting property taxes for residents and businesses. So that's what we're going to do. We'll defer payments by 90 days to enable providing $1.8 billion of urgent relief to people and businesses, while ensuring that school boards have the funds that they need. We're also proposing a Regional Opportunities Investment Tax Credit, a 10% refundable corporate income tax credit to encourage business to invest in regions that see below-average economic performance, as soon as they are in a position to do so. Mr. Speaker, our plan is providing $10 billion of immediate relief to project jobs and help people. Our work to stabilize energy prices over the long term continues. We will increase funding for our energy subsidy by $1.5 billion to $5.6 billion this year, providing direct relief to every family, small business and farm in Ontario. And in response to COVID-19, we are going a step further. Mr. Speaker, one thing I've heard loud and clear from people who are self-isolating is the concern over time-limited metering. That is why we are setting time-of-use electricity prices for residential, farm and small business customers at the lowest rate, known as off-peak, for 24 hours a day, starting at March 24th, yesterday, supporting ratepayers while they use more electricity during the daytime. And for those most in need, we're also increasing funding for the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program by $9 million for households that are having difficulty paying a natural gas or electricity bill. In doing so, we will make sure that electricity and natural gas services are not disconnected for non-payment during the length of the COVID-19 crisis. Premier Ford and I have been in close contact with our federal counterparts, as I know have the rest of my cabinet colleagues. We want to thank them for their work to protect the health and safety of Ontarians and for working to protect the wages and jobs of workers. This is not a time for partisan politics, Mr. Speaker. As the Premier has said, right now there is no Team Blue, Team Orange, Team Red or Team Green. There is just Team Ontario. I want to thank all of the members of this chamber, including the leaders of the NDP, Liberal and Green Party, and the independent members for working with us. We appreciate their suggestions on how Ontario should respond to COVID-19, and we are grateful that they have worked with us so we could introduce this update in such extraordinary times. Our government is committed to protecting our economy, and our approach will evolve based on how the coming weeks and months evolve. We were elected on a promise to the people of Ontario to be good fiscal managers. That means being ready for an emergency, and that emergency is COVID-19. While we projected a 2019-2020 deficit, we do project a 2019-2020 deficit of $9.2 billion, a $1.1 billion improvement relative to last year's budget. Next year, the deficit will be much larger as a result of COVID-19. We project it will be $20.5 billion. Today's plan includes historic levels of prudence, including a dedicated $1 billion COVID-19 contingency fund, the standard $1.3 billion contingency fund, and an unprecedented reserve of $2.5 billion, the largest in Ontario's history. These funds are available to be deployed as the COVID-19 crisis evolves. We are confident that every dollar we invest to save a life or save a job is a dollar well invested. Mr. Speaker, there are moments that define a generation. COVID-19 is our moment. The closed schools and quiet streets will be remembered, but eventually these memories will become more distant. But, Mr. Speaker, I will never forget driving on Harwood Avenue in Ajax earlier this week at 7:30 in the evening and hearing cheers from the porches and balconies. Cheers for the returning frontline healthcare workers at the Ajax Pickering Hospital, returning for their next shift. Long after we defeated COVID-19, the Ontario spirit at home in Ajax and across Ontario will still be there, and it will still be strong. Our response as a province and as a country will shape the character of our next generation. So let us be responsible, kind, measured, determined, and let us be strong. From our manufacturers who are pivoting to provide vital medical equipment, to the family that orders takeout from their favourite restaurant to help keep the lights on, to the young girl who calls her grandmother every day while practicing social distancing. These stories give me confidence that the principles that we share across Ontario, wherever we live, will not be lost during this global pandemic. By living by these principles, we will weather this storm together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Responses? I recognize the Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you very much, Speaker. As I rise to speak to this fiscal update, I am both grateful and very proud that as we face these challenging and uncertain times, the people of this great province are responding with selflessness and solidarity. Thank you to our province's public health staff and healthcare workers for their courage, their sacrifice, and their hard work in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Every day, they assess and test thousands of Ontarians, care for our loved ones and neighbours who are sick, and fight the spread of COVID-19 in communities across our province. I also want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the grocery store staff, the pharmacists, the transit drivers, and first responders, those who get up and go to work every day so that others can do their part and stay home. We owe all of these folks a deep and profound debt of gratitude. Speaker, I'm so proud that people across the province are taking this crisis very, very seriously. Thank you to Ontarians for proactively following public health officials' advice. And thank you to those who are digging deep and finding creative ways to safely strengthen our communities and look out for one another. The thoughts of all Ontarians continue to be with those battling COVID-19 and their families. We also extend our deepest condolences to folks who've lost loved ones in this pandemic. We wish them all comfort and peace during this incredibly difficult time. Speaker, all of us in this House know that Ontarians are depending on us to get this right. New Democrats will support this bill and will allow it to pass immediately, but I am extremely concerned that the provincial government's financial statement fails to put money in the pockets of people that desperately need it and doesn't provide the help that small and medium-sized local businesses need. People have seen their incomes drastically cut or eliminated altogether, and that didn't just start today. That's been ongoing now for almost 2 weeks. People are anxiously watching their retirement savings drain away as markets continue to falter. And all of us are worried about the most vulnerable amongst us during this pandemic. People need help. People need help now. They need the province of Ontario to step up and help them. This package does not do that. It will not help anyone sleep tonight. It will not stop businesses on the edge from falling off the cliff. But it has to be said, Speaker, that in the face of this crisis, Ontarians are stepping up and demonstrating radical kindness and compassion. From picking up groceries or cooking for elderly and immune-compromised neighbours, to creatively sharing their skills to build community, like artists giving free lessons online. Some businesses, large and small, are doing their part, like Toronto's Fiesta Farms and many others, dedicating hours to seniors and immune-compromised folks, or distilleries like Black's Distillery in Peterborough and Dixon's Distilled Spirits in Guelph, pitching in to manufacture hand sanitizer for healthcare workers. So, Speaker, we will get through this together, but now is not the time for half measures. It's time to give people the money and the help that they need. They need that money and help right away. They can't wait until middle of April or the end of April to figure out how much money is going to be in their pocket. That money should have been in this financial statement today. They need to know that they can weather this storm, Speaker. I know that we have to meet the challenges that we face head-on, and Ontarians are doing their part to do exactly that. It's time for the province to do its part. It's time for the province to step up and help people by putting money in their pockets so they know how they're going to get through the rest of this month and the beginning of the next, never mind the next possible several months to come. Thank you, Speaker, for your attention, and I look forward to the rest of the comments today.
Thank you. Responses? The member for Ottawa South.
Thank you very much, Speaker. These are extraordinary times. I'd like to echo the Minister's remark in thanking everybody on the front lines. The front lines just happen to be everywhere. Thank
you to all Ontarians that help the first-line workers.
As usual out there, so it can't be business as usual in here. And it's heartening and hopeful to see the level of collaboration, not only in here, but amongst governments. It gives one hope. The measures outlined with respect to health are important. If I had one concern that I could express right now is that the amount for personal protective equipment will likely not be enough. And I know we all want to protect those people who are on the front lines, at the bedside, protecting the people that we love, and maybe us. And we very much appreciated the Minister's mention of mental health. I know it's not specifically in the document, and it's very clear to all of us that in the coming months this is going to be something very critical to families and individuals, and they're going to want to know where they're going to get some help. And I look forward to working with the government on that. So, there's time enough to talk about lessons learned. I think one of the lessons that we've learned is the critical importance of regional structures and community-based care. You can see that in this document. You can see that in the Minister's response. The economic measures outlined in this bill are good steps forward. Expansion of gains and support on home energy and childcare are good. We know that more Ontarians are going to need to get more money in their hands, and we strongly suggest that the government match the federal government's wage subsidy of 10%. Now, the expansion of the employer health tax, exemption of the employer health tax will be welcome for many small businesses. And most of the measures in here are deferrals of taxation. I suggest the government's going to have to do more. There'll be more where that putting it off is not going to help. So we'll be supporting this. But we all know there's more to do, all of us. Families and small businesses need relief. So we're here to work with you to ensure that all Ontarians get what they and their families need as expeditiously as possible. And thank you very much for your time, Mr. Speaker.
Responses. The member for Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. We're all in this together. We've heard that a lot over the last few weeks. And we as legislatures have an obligation to rise to this moment. The people of Ontario have, and I want to thank the frontline healthcare workers and first responders, and I too want to thank the delivery drivers, transit drivers, retail clerks, all the people working in shelters, all the people who are on the front lines, making sure life continues so those who can stay home can stay home. You have our gratitude. Legislators need to step up, and last week I talked about the need to quarantine partisanship, and we did that last week. And Greens will do that again in helping get this legislation through the House today in an unprecedented way, 2 weeks in a row. But I want to say to the government that quarantining partisanship is a two-way street. It's not only us working with the government, but it's the government working with us and listening to us. And so I want to just share a bit about what people are telling me. First of all, I have many of my constituents and people across the province deeply concerned that the list of essential businesses is far too broad. I've had a lot of construction workers in particular raise concerns about the safety and sanitary conditions on their sites. I know the Ontario Construction Consortium has raised those concerns, and I know the Premier has as well. But I think we need to look at this moving forward and address it. I also believe the government needs to rise to the occasion when it comes to the funding allocations in the fall economic statement. I'm deeply concerned that the money set aside for frontline healthcare workers is not going to be enough. People need basic income support payments right now. And small businesses, particularly our local small businesses, are going to need additional supports. And so as we quarantine partisanship, I want to work with the government to make sure that happens, Speaker.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time we have available for responses. Motions. Again, I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I believe you will find unanimous consent to move a motion without notice regarding immediate passage of one bill, hearings at the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, and House business.
Mr. Calandra is seeking unanimous consent of the House to move a motion without notice regarding immediate passage of one bill, hearings at the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, and House business. Agreed? Agreed. I'll again recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that, notwithstanding any standing order or special order of the House, that the order of second reading of Bill 188, an act to enact and amend various statutes, may be called today, and when that order is called, 55 minutes shall be allotted to the debate on the motion for second reading of the bill, with 20 minutes allotted to the government, 20 minutes allotted to the official opposition, and 15 minutes allotted to the independent members as a group, at the end of which time the Speaker shall interrupt and put every question necessary to dispose of this stage of the bill without further debate or amendment, and at such time the bill shall be ordered for third reading, and that the order for third reading of Bill 188 shall then immediately be called, and the question shall immediately be put on the motion for third reading of the bill without debate or amendment, and that the leaders of the parties represented in the Legislative Assembly, as well as independent members, may file copies of letters with the Speaker, who shall cause them to be laid upon the table, containing their recommendations to the Minister of Finance with respect to the economic and fiscal measures they propose to be included in the provisions of Bill 188. And such letters shall be deemed to be referred to the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, and that when the committees of the Legislature resume meeting, the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs shall be authorized to consider the party leader and independent members' letters, together with an act to enact and amend various statutes as passed by the Legislature today, with the first witnessed during such consideration to be the Minister of Finance, and that the requirement for notice be waived for ballot item numbers 8 to 16 inclusive in the order of precedence on the ballot list for private members' public business, and that the adjournment debate scheduled for Wednesday, March 25th, 2020, filed by the member for Oshawa, be withdrawn, and that in the case of any division on any proceeding provided for in the motion, the division bells be limited to 5 minutes, and that the House shall continue to meet beyond the normal hour of adjournment today if necessary, and that when the House adjourns today, it shall stand adjourned until April 14th, 2020 at 1 p.m.
Mr. Calandra has moved that, notwithstanding any standing order or special order of the House, dispense? Dispense. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carry? Carried. Carried. Motions. It is now time for petitions. Orders of the day. Again, I recognize the Government House Leader.
Speaker, G188.
Order G188, second reading of Bill 188, an act to enact and amend various statutes. Mr. Phillips.
Recognize.
Just a second.
Government House Leader.
I move second reading of Bill 188, an act to enact and amend various statutes.
Mr. Calandra has moved second reading of Bill 188, an act to enact and amend various statutes. Further debate? I recognize the member for Willowdale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our world has changed in the last 2 weeks. No one can deny that we face, that our province, that our country face an immense challenge. In his inaugural speech at the height of the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt spoke to a fearful nation. Only a foolish optimist can deny the dark realities of the moment, he said. Yet compared with the perils which our forefathers conquered, because they believed and were not afraid, we have still much to be thankful for. We too should be thankful, Mr. Speaker. Thankful for our brave and unceasing healthcare workers, our doctors, our nurses, hospital administrators and cleaning staff. Thankful for our heroic emergency responders, our police, firefighters, paramedics and their families. We're undaunted, everyday heroes, stocking grocery store shelves, manufacturing hand sanitizer, running food banks, bringing supplies to seniors, pitching in. I also want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your continued service to this House. Thank you to our dedicated clerks, our Sergeant-at-Arms, translators, and Hansard, to our staff and bureaucrats who have worked around the clock to ensure that government can act and act now. And to the media, who've helped keep Ontarians informed and educated in this time when information is the most important weapon we have. And thank you to my colleagues on all sides of this House for your presence here today, and to those who cannot be here for serving in this time of great uncertainty, for putting differences in politics aside to protect Ontarians, and for defending, even in this time of crisis, the democracy we all cherish as Canadians. Thank you. Like everyone, Mr. Speaker, I've struggled over the last few days, and I've felt anxious about the future. I've worried about loved ones, about the health of my elderly parents, the livelihoods of my friends losing jobs and going out of business, about finances and food. And I felt helpless, Mr. Speaker, watching the endless news of new cases and economic uncertainty. And while we can't deny that these are challenging times, we cannot forget that we face them together, that no one is alone. We face these challenges together with our families and our communities as Team Ontario. And Speaker, it will be hard, but we will get through this time together. Ontarians are strong, and your government will do everything necessary to protect you. From the beginning of this crisis, Mr. Speaker, this government has taken swift action, and we've worked tirelessly to ensure the health and safety of Ontarians. On March 17th, the government declared a state of emergency and announced an initial investment of $304 million to respond immediately to the COVID-19 pandemic, an investment to increase hospital capacity, provide more testing, provide frontline workers, vulnerable seniors, and Indigenous communities with support. In the 8 days since then, our government has continued to act to ensure this health and safety of every Ontarian. We have worked to limit the spread of the virus and flatten the curve by closing non-essential businesses, closing schools, and public spaces. Last week, Speaker, with the help of all members of all parties, this House passed emergency legislation ensuring no worker would lose their job for self-isolating, taking care of their children, or looking after a loved one. We are working with businesses across the province to produce much-needed medical supplies, working with municipalities and food producers to keep deliveries of food and essential products reaching store shelves around the clock, and working to ensure our children can continue their education from the safety of their home. Speaker, this pandemic has moved quickly, and the situation has changed by the hour. But thanks to the dedication of Ontario's health officials, our public service, and leaders of all three levels of government, we have acted just as quickly, providing childcare to frontline healthcare workers, enhancing screening measures, and providing immediate electricity rate relief for families and small businesses. Today, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has taken another critical step by tabling the Ontario 2020 Action Plan responding to COVID-19 to safeguard the health of Ontarians and to provide support to people and businesses as we face the economic symptoms of this unprecedented health emergency. Speaker, the health and safety of our people is this government's #1 priority. And today's economic statement lays out the first phase response to ensure hospitals and public health officials have the resources they need to protect us. This government will invest an additional $3.3 billion in the healthcare sector in 2020-2021, including $1.2 billion in new spending to meet the increased demand in the health and long-term care sector, and $2.1 billion in new measures to fight COVID-19. This investment will help us increase our hospital capacity, create over 70 additional assessment centres, increase lab testing capacity, more funding for public health units, and surge capacity in long-term care. It will also include $75 million in new spending for personal protective equipment and critical supplies for our courageous frontline workers. We will do everything we can to protect them so they can continue to protect us. Ontarians are stepping up, Mr. Speaker. They're also doing their part to protect our frontline workers, their families, their neighbours, by simply staying home. Physical distancing and the closing of non-essential businesses has been hard on people, on businesses and our economy, but it is a vital step in stemming the spread of COVID-19. Today, our government is proposing a multitude of responsible and responsive measures to protect individuals, families, communities, businesses, industries, and our provincial economy during this crisis. The $17 billion in support proposed today reflects how seriously this government takes the threat posed by this global pandemic. In addition to the $3.3 billion in new healthcare spending, our government is proposing $3.7 billion in direct supports for people and businesses, and an additional $10 billion through tax and other deferrals to leave more money in the pockets of people and improve cash flow for businesses over the coming months. Our government, Mr. Speaker, will always protect the most vulnerable in our communities. I know in my community of Willowdale, our seniors, and especially low-income seniors, are grappling to cope with the side effects of physical distancing. This generation that works so hard to provide a better Ontario for their children and their grandchildren are particularly at risk of infection and severe illness. Many live alone, and they struggle even under normal circumstances to safely complete daily tasks like shopping for groceries, traveling to see a doctor, or visiting family. If passed, the Ontario 2020 Action Plan would provide an additional $75 million for low-income seniors by doubling the guaranteed annual income system payments. This increase would provide eligible seniors with additional funds to stock up on necessary supplies, pay for delivery of groceries, for example, or pay for internet so they can video call their grandkids. Our government is also working with our partners in the municipal and non-for-profit sectors to coordinate subsidized deliveries of meals, medicines, and other essentials for seniors. Speaker, we're also working with municipalities to add funding where it will matter most, providing additional funding to direct social services administration boards and service providers so that they can respond quickly on the ground to local needs. For Ontarians with student debt, Speaker, we are proposing a 6-month suspension of OSAP loan repayments and no new interest, leaving more money in the pockets of young Ontarians starting out in their careers. These measures and other new investments in our social services sector will build on the work this government has been undertaking for the past year to make life more affordable for all Ontarians. We've lowered income tax on the lowest income earners. We've provided support for childcare and dental care to low-income families and seniors respectively. And we will build on the emergency measures taken this week, like lowering electricity costs and expanding eligibility for the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program. No matter where in Ontario you live, Windsor to Kenora, no matter how much money you make, whether you are a senior or a teenager, living in affordable housing, a condo, a house, or a farm, we've got your back. Today, our government is also proposing important measures that will support businesses and buttress Ontario's economy through the global economic uncertainty ahead. Speaker, over the past week, I've been on the phone, as many of my colleagues have, with businesses of all sizes in my riding of Willowdale and across the province. And I mean, they've ranged from restaurant owners, cleaning companies, accountants, manufacturers, duty-free stores, and farmers. And I've heard one thing consistently from every entrepreneur and every business owner I've spoken to. They've all asked, what can I do to help the government? What can I do to help my community? Speaker, this is the Ontario spirit that the Premier speaks about. And it doesn't surprise me in the least. Growing up in a small business family, I know firsthand that business owners are often the last to get paid. They often go without a paycheck so that they can pay their employees and keep the doors open. And so, in a time of crisis, the first question business owners are often asking is, are the people that rely on me going to be okay? The threat to our economy, especially to our small business, is unprecedented, and we know that this threat will have monumental consequences for real people, for families. To help businesses across Ontario, our government is proposing to provide $10 billion in tax and other deferrals to free up much-needed cash flow to help businesses bridge to better days ahead and to keep their employees in their jobs and on the payroll. Our government is proposing to double the employer health tax exemption in 2020. This change, if passed, would reduce the employer health tax for 57,000 private sector job creators and eliminate tax altogether for 30,000 businesses, adding $350 million into our economy. We are taking bold and necessary action to ensure that jobs are protected. By providing interest and penalty relief of 5 months for businesses to file and make payments for most provincially administered taxes, businesses can redirect that cash to maintaining payroll, covering rent payments, and staying afloat. These measures will provide Ontario businesses with $6 billion in needed cash flow and financial flexibility. As Ontario's businesses are shifting to help in our fight against COVID-19, from retooling auto manufacturing plants to make ventilators and producing hand sanitizer in craft distilleries, to restaurants offering no physical contact food deliveries and seniors-only shopping hours at pharmacies, we in turn must do everything we can to fight for businesses. Speaker, building a business is hard in the best of economic times. And in the challenging times ahead, we must remember that behind every small business is the small business family, fighting to survive, to improve their community, responsible for the livelihoods of their employees and their families, working long hours. These measures and the measures being taken by our partners in the federal government will help them weather the storm. You know, Speaker, growing up, my parents always told me, my younger sister and my younger brother, to save for a rainy day. When times were good and their convenience store was doing well, they would save every penny they could. They knew that when times were tough, when the store was robbed or the basement flooded and they were forced to close, that they would still need to put food on the table for our family. Our government, too, has been saving for a rainy day, Speaker. Over the past year and a half, we've been working diligently toward fiscal prudence and financial stability so that when the storm came, we would have the resources to act, the fiscal flexibility to take extraordinary measures to help Ontarians. Well, Speaker, the storm is here, and our government will spare no expense to protect the people we serve. Despite our physical isolation, this pandemic has brought all of us closer together. Our communities and our province have come together to help and encourage one another. In this House, we have set aside our partisan differences and united in the thing we have always shared, the desire to better our communities and to better our province. And it's why I'm hopeful that this bill, the Ontario 2020 Action Plan responding to COVID-19, will be supported by all members of this House. And I'm hopeful that this spirit of cooperation and multi-partisanship will last beyond our current crisis. Our government will continue to act, Mr. Speaker. We will spare no cost in protecting the health and safety of Ontarians, and we will do everything necessary to support individuals, families, communities, businesses, and industries in the trying times ahead. Speaker, we cannot deny the dark realities of the moment, but we must have hope. We must take solace in the Ontario spirit, see the good in those around us. We will get through this together. Know that your government is in your corner, fighting alongside you, making sure no one is left behind. Know that you are not alone. Speaker, we know that our great province will endure. Ontario will endure. We will recover, and we will prosper. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. Further debate? I recognize the member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to begin by acknowledging all the MPPs in the House on both sides of the aisle. You know, we all have a responsibility to our constituents and to all Ontarians, and this crisis is certainly going to be a test of our leadership. And, you know, we all have a responsibility to rise to this occasion. You know, in our own lives, for me as a parent and as a grandparent, I feel that I'm being called upon to stand tall in these difficult times. And as the Minister of Finance said, this is a moment that will define a generation. Lately, I have been thinking a lot about my grandparents. They lived through the Blitz in Great Britain, and I'm sure many of you have the same stories from your parents and grandparents. They probably have very similar histories. And, you know, they had to guide and protect their kids in the most difficult, unprecedented times, and I would suggest that we're facing those same kind of difficult times. But they did it, and what I remember is they did it with such generosity of spirit. And my mom and dad tell stories that, about how they had to ration food. And there was a famous story in my family about how my grandfather ate a whole month's worth of ration of cheese on one sandwich. And at the time, it was horrific, but that story keeps going down through my family. And so I think what we've learned from that is that we can learn lessons from the past, learn lessons on how to stand up and stand tall. And while my parents had to ration food, the thing that they never rationed was their kindness and their compassion for others. You know, we all have said this in the House today, that we survive and we will always survive by looking out for those around us. Our friends, our families, our neighbours, and most importantly, the vulnerable among us. So yes, this crisis is certainly a test of our leadership, and it is a test of our compassion for others. Thanks. Thank you. And as legislators, we do have the power to be kind, to provide relief, to ensure no one is left behind. What we do here as a government, it matters deeply. And we see governments across the world are looking like never before to governments for leadership and for relief in these times. And so we all know that we have seen weeks of layoffs. We have people being locked down. We've made it clear that poor and working-class people we've seen will bear a disproportionately big share of the pain from the coronavirus pandemic. As it stands, the economic effects of the COVID-19 crisis will mean difficult trade-offs for so many families in this province. Buy groceries or pay the heating bill, borrow to pay the rent on time, or miss the payment. But we know for many Canadians this has already been a reality for them. This has already been the norm. But it's even more so a problem looming for other people that never expected to be in this situation. You know, a recent Angus Reid poll just came out that said 44% of Canadians said that they or someone in their household has lost hours or work due to the economic downturn. 44% of Canadians. And of those who'd lost work, 62% said that they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to afford groceries. So these are desperate times indeed. But, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to accept a situation that will leave so many in this province without, especially now. You know, in this legislature, we could have embraced some of the ideas that we put forward. We could have embraced the idea of an emergency income program, which is so desperately needed right now. I mean, we had an opportunity here to ensure that no one is left behind, but instead, we had this bill before us today. You know, the Finance Minister just told the House that this is the government's first step in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And with all due respect to the Minister, I'd like to say that this is a very, very small step, a very timid step indeed. You know, there's nothing in this bill that is giving the people that are looking for immediate relief, for direct relief. It's not here. People are not who have been expecting for their government to allay their fears about what they're facing. It's not here in this bill. We had an opportunity to do that, and it's not here. You know, again, with all due respect, the member from Willowdale said that this bill is bold, and I'm here to say that there's nothing about this bill that is bold. There's nothing in this bill that is extraordinary at all. I mean, this financial statement leaves people out, so many people out, and it leaves out help for people. I mean, for families and small and medium-sized business owners, people that we know are laying awake at night, who do have to go week to week to make the payroll as it is already. They're wondering how they're going to keep their heads above water, and there's nothing in this bill that's going to help them sleep at night. You know, so many Ontarians are at the financial breaking point, as we know from COVID-19. You know, April 1st, rent and mortgage payments are coming due, and people's credit cards are piling up. I know mine is. I know that my family, we're adding extra expenses each and every day. And people are laying awake at night worrying. I know everyone in this house is laying awake at night worrying for themselves, worrying for their families, and worrying for others. Some of us are privileged enough to have a home. Others have to worry about whether they're going to face eviction, whether they're going to have to face debts that are racking up that they will never, ever be able to pay. You know, we hear these stories in the House about how people have done their part. We hear all of the stories about people are sharing, who are picking up groceries. We heard stories about companies like Dillon's. I happen to have one of the Dillon's disinfectants that they're making. So people are doing their part. They're stepping up. And I would like to say that the province of Ontario needs to step up bolder than what they've done here. This is not
that will support Ontario's families and businesses. This is an unprecedented time, and we are responding with an unprecedented plan. Our province is facing a challenge, the likes of which we have not seen for generations. COVID-19 has emerged as a monumental threat to our health and to our economy. But we will fight this threat with every ounce of our resolve. We will fight for those in the hospital battling this virus. We will fight for the nurses and doctors working around the clock. We will fight for the mothers and fathers already struggling to put food on the table. We will fight for those trying to keep a roof over their heads. I promise you, we will fight, and we will not stop fighting. The next round of that fight starts right here and right now, with $17 billion in new emergency relief and support. That's $17 billion. Support for our frontline healthcare workers, relief for families, relief for business, and relief for workers. $17 billion in relief and support for all of you across this great province, because it's all of you, it's all of Ontario, that inspires me to take on COVID-19 round after round. The paramedics, the nurses, the doctors, personal support workers, and all of the healthcare workers, the firefighters, the police, and all the first responders. You have our backs, and we have yours. The heroes in uniforms, you inspire me. The grocery store clerks, the truck drivers, the construction workers, the cleaners, the transit workers, and everyone working through these tough times. You too are heroes. You inspire me. It's the actions of the many that shine brightest in these dark times. The Ontario spirit is shining, a guiding light. People and businesses are hearing a call to action. They're standing up and offering a helping hand. They're doing all they can to help us make it through these dark times. These countless acts of care and compassion move me. They inspire me, and they give me hope. These acts, this spirit, the Ontario spirit, it gives me hope. It gives me hope Ontario will lead the way in this fight. It gives me hope for the health and well-being of everyone in this great province. And it gives me hope that when we come out of this, when we come out of these tough times, we will emerge stronger than ever before. And when people look back, when they reflect on these dark days, when the history books are written, they won't be writing about me, they'll be writing about you, Ontario. Thank you, and God bless. I now will turn it over to my Finance Minister, Rod Phillips.
Thank you very much, Premier, for your leadership and inspiration. I also want to thank all the members of the legislature, as I did in my speech, particularly the leaders of the opposition parties, and for their cooperation and collaboration in putting together this unprecedented package under these very difficult circumstances. We're very proud of what we brought together because we think that it represents a good first step, a start in terms of this province's reaction to COVID-19. We believe that the $17 billion, $7 billion of direct support and $10 billion of support with cash flow for businesses and individuals will make a big difference in the lives of Ontarians at a very, very difficult time. So I know that that we want to get to questions, and I'm sure there are many of them. So with that, Premier, I'm going to turn it back to the reporters for questions.
We'll go to the phone line. First question.
From Christina Tenaglia at CP24.
Hi, Premier. Hi, Minister. Thank you so much for your time. My first question to the Premier is not about the fiscal announcement today. It's once again about essential services. And Premier, I know you're aware of the continued calls from construction workers that they not be listed as an essential service. And you did say yesterday that items could be added or removed to the essential service list. Right. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca is also calling for a one-week pause. Will you reconsider?
Well, I'll tell you right now, we have 125 inspectors out there looking into every single project that's happening just here in Ontario. I'm sorry, just here in Toronto. I apologize. Just here in Toronto, we have over 125 inspectors. I've talked to the trade leaders as well, the construction companies, union leaders. And again, I want to make it very, very clear. And I said it yesterday, I said it the day before. If the workplace, the construction site, is not safe, you can walk off the job. And I'll have zero tolerance for any construction site that doesn't have the proper essentials to make sure they keep the workers safe and have make sure the outhouses are clean, make sure the sanitizers are there, make sure they have running water. And I know our inspectors have already written up 12 sites so far. But let me be very, very clear. If a construction worker does not feel safe, I say it day after day after day, walk off the site.
Follow up.
Thank you, Premier. This question is for the Premier or Minister Phillips. We've been hearing from small business owners with rent being due on April the 1st. You both had alluded or made the announcement recently that nobody in the province would be evicted who lives in a home or a condo, but small business owners who pay rent, what in the announcement today is for them, or what is your message to them if they cannot pay rent on April the 1st to those who own the properties that they lease? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. There were a number of items in our announcements and in our program, the energy rebate program, the employer health tax, both cut and rebate that will support many, many businesses. But it's going to take all of us putting our heads together and our hands together to get through this task. We've been in conversations. I know the federal finance minister, my counterpart Bill Morneau, has been in conversations conversations. I know Mayor Tory has been in conversations with landlords, talking to them about needing to make sure that they are looking after the long-term interests of all of their tenants, and particularly the small businesses that are under so much pressure. So there's a number of specific initiatives in this package today that will help support them. I should note as well that Minister Morneau expanded his income support package today, very much at the urgings of Premier Ford, who had been pushing for that and lobbying for that. But as we've said, this is a good start. We are going to count on people, landlords among them, to be responsive to making sure that they're supporting our small businesses and our larger businesses at this very difficult time.
Next question.
From Jeff Gray at the Globe and Mail.
Hi there. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the economic projections of GDP basically flatlining. Things have been moving very quickly. How likely is it that we think that'll actually be worse?
Well, I'll pass this over to the Finance Minister one more time.
Thank you for the question, Jeff. As you know, just less than 2 weeks ago, we were planning to introduce a budget which, like all the other provincial budgets, and I imagine the federal budget being presented, had economic assumptions that were based on the economy 3 weeks ago. One of the reasons that we adjusted our stance and went ahead with this fiscal and economic statement was to have a more current view of that. Now, this projection of zero growth is obviously a very, very prudent projection, but this is a very fast-moving situation. One of the things that I'll point out to you is that we have put in place historic reserves, larger than ever before in the province of Ontario, $2.5 billion. And as we've talked about before, each point of GDP affects the province's revenues by about $700 to $750 million. So in a sense, we've built in a cushion because there is so much uncertainty right now. What we are seeing are record amounts of fiscal and monetary stimulus. It's one of the reasons that the markets have been up over the last short while. But we will have to continue to observe what happens. We thought it was very important, though, that for the people of Ontario, we put out a statement that we be clear, not just about the economic situation we're facing, but also the finances. We have many, many transfer partners that are very important to us, municipalities, hospitals, school boards, that we need to make sure know the funding that they expect every year is coming. That's why we had this financial statement. That's why we've done this tier, a one-year budget, because we want to make sure that they know what they're getting. They're our partners.
There are some saying that there's not enough being done for people who've lost their jobs or lost income. Can you respond to that criticism of the document you presented today?
You know, we have included many, many initiatives, $75 million for 194,000 of our lowest income seniors. Of course, the check, there's almost 2 million students in Ontario, so $200 for every child under 12 to support parents. So we've made some very direct interventions in addition to the monies provided for Ontario Works in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But of course, we're doing this with the support as well and in support of what the federal government is doing. This is something where all level of governments are going to have to work together. But we have $3.7 billion here in support for people and the economy. And beyond our support for healthcare, $3.3 billion, that's our priority right now.
Next question.
From Brian Lilly at the Toronto Sun.
Premier, you keep saying that if people don't feel safe on the work site, they should simply walk off the job.
Right.
I'm wondering what you would say to them if, after doing that, they find out that they're no longer eligible for employment insurance because your government's plan doesn't have anything to support them directly. It relies on the federal plan, and if you simply walk off the job, you may not be eligible for EI. So what do you say to people who are worried about paying the bills, but also worried about showing up on the work site?
Well, Brian, what I understand, the federal government, if you can't work because of coronavirus, there will be a package out there. There is a package right now. And safety is a number one priority. The health and safety of the frontline workers, that's our number one priority. And again, we have 125 inspectors out there. They've written 12 summons right now, just today alone. And we've had conversations with labor leaders. So any union, any labor leader, no matter if it's Leuna or the Carpenters or anyone else, if they want their members off the site, then they should be calling them off the site. We listen to the leadership of the labor folks that are on these sites day in and day out. And I want to emphasize one more time, because I've talked to many of them. They want their workers to continue, the workers want to continue, and if there's one labor union that may not want them to work, be it the Carpenters or maybe someone else, then I encourage them to tell their workers not to show up. It's as simple as that. I can't stress it any more. You do not have to come to work. Simple as that.
Even if it means that you don't actually qualify for EI or any other pay. I mean, if your inspectors aren't able to get out there quick enough to document it, they may end up actually just not having anything to fall back on. Is that the wisest?
Well, Brian, let me again, I'll answer it again, that what I understand, they will be able to collect payment from the federal government, and matter of fact, I'm positive they will, because I asked the question to the federal government, so they will be able to collect.
Next question.
From Sean Jeffers at the Canadian Press.
Question for the Minister of Health. Minister, obviously there's a lot of funding here for healthcare across the board, specifically to hospitals to create beds. How quickly do you anticipate that they will be able to respond, and how quickly will this funding flow?
Well, the funding will be flowing immediately. This is something that is very important, that we create this space in hospitals. And it's coming from a variety of sources from around the province, including creating brand new spaces, opening up unused beds. And of course, in addition to that, hospitals are looking at canceling, postponing elective surgeries. So we're working on many fronts to create this capacity, because we anticipate that there will be increased hospitalizations as COVID-19 continues in Ontario.
Question for the Premier as a follow-up on the economic side. You know, you promised when you were first elected to balance the budget. This obviously will have a major impact on that, posting a deficit next year of $20 billion. I'm wondering if you can walk us through that process and your decision making here, and I guess the difficulties that this might present.
Well, we've shown to the people of Ontario we can be fiscal, prudent managers of the taxpayers' money. As the minister mentioned, we were able to find savings of billions and billions of dollars just in the last 6 months. And if we weren't fiscal, prudent managers, we wouldn't be able to offer up what we're offering today. These are unprecedented times. And I'll tell the people of Ontario, we will do whatever it takes. We will spend whatever it takes to make sure we protect the health and the economy of this province and the people in this province.
Next question.
From Victoria Gibson at iPolitics.
Hi, this question is for Minister Phillips. Your plan today seems to assume that the province will be back to a period of growth by late 2020. When you were putting the plan together, how long did you predict the social distancing and business closures will last? There must have been some sort of modeling involved there.
There, of course, was economic modeling, but we are in unprecedented times. Underlying any economic challenge like the one we faced is a matter of confidence, and in this case, the confidence is a function of a healthcare crisis, a global healthcare crisis. So we made assessments, again, looking at a variety of private sector sources in terms of economists, as well as looking at typical or other sorts of scenarios like this. But the truth is, we do our very best to put together projections, but things are changing hour to hour, day to day. What we've done, though, is made sure that the province has the financial firepower in terms of the reserves and in terms of the investments that we need to make, that the province will be able to weather whatever is on the horizon.
Thank you. And in follow-up, similar to Jeff's question, How much do you think the economic outlook here in Ontario has changed even between when the plan was finalized last week and today? Are you more or less optimistic about the economic picture than you were last week?
You know, it's impossible not to be affected. I guess this is less a question about how economists feel, but just how all of us feel as people. It's impossible not to be affected by the incredible number of layoffs that have occurred and the impact on families of that. But I will say, and that has been stark. But I will say as well that we've seen unprecedented levels of both fiscal and monetary stimulus. We've seen even today the federal government intervening with additional investments for individuals, which again, as I said, the Premier and myself have been working with our colleagues federally to see that happen. And we are seeing a response in the markets, for example, to that. So this is something that's going to be very volatile for the period ahead. Obviously, the projections we made are ones that we think will stand up, but we're going to have to adjust them. And I'll just remind the folks that, you know, unlike previous governments, we have made a commitment that on a quarterly basis, I'll be out to make sure we update the financials. So we will, on a very regular basis, be reporting back on this plan, on its progress, on the economics behind it, to make sure that Ontarians can trust what we're saying.
Next question.
From Mike Crawley at CBC News.
Hi, question for the Premier. Just wondering, what's it feel like to have to table a budget that has a $20.5 billion deficit? Did you ever think in your wildest dreams you'd be putting forward a budget with such a big deficit?
No, I think no one in this world in their wildest dreams would be saying, Mike, what we're going through, all of us around the world. And we're going to do whatever it takes to protect the people of Ontario. And, you know, within the fiscal restraint, the fiscal capacity that we have, because I'm confident the manufacturing might and the ingenuity of this province, when we get through this, we're going to come back stronger than ever before. And I want to tell you a story, Mike, today, and talking about manufacturing might, private sector stepping up. We had a meeting with Linamar, Woodbridge, Magna, and Martin Rea. Four leaders, I should say, worldwide leaders that are here, right here in Ontario. And some of the best engineering minds, manufacturing minds, anywhere in the world. We were on the phone today. They're coming up. Woodbridge is coming up with equivalent to the N95 masks. And by the way, through the great leadership of the Minister of Health, we were able to find 5 million N95 masks. They're on order coming into Ontario through Ackland Granger. We had 3 million, another 2 million from 3M. We have millions of surgical gloves. And these three companies, they're putting together a plan and moving forward in a rapid speed, something that would take 6 months, they're going to be doing in weeks through their expertise, working collaboratively together to build ventilators. We can't rely on the rest of the world when they're in crisis. And the manufacturing might of this province, we're going to produce them for Ontario, we're going to produce them for the rest of Canada and the province when they're up and running in a few weeks. And I was just so impressed with those four companies, along with many other companies, but especially those four companies being able to pull it all together and start building these ventilators again, and not just for Canada. And if we have extra, we'll be shipping them around the world. That's what you call the Ontario spirit.
I'll pass on my follow-up so that other colleagues can get to their questions.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, this will be the last question. Cynthia?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you. Hello, Premier.
Hi, Cynthia.
A year ago, Ontario's fiscal watchdog warned that if you didn't put $7 billion more into healthcare in the next 3 years, that the system would not be maintained at the status quo. So that's $2.3 billion per year. You're putting $3.3 billion in to fight COVID. So, you know, in theory, $2 billion of that was just to maintain the current system. Is there going to be enough
to fight the pandemic and have enough resources in the hospitals with $3.3 additional billion?
Well, we're increasing that spending up to, I think it's 4.3% or 4.5%. The finance minister can correct me. But again, we're pouring billions and billions of dollars into the healthcare system. Before this crisis took place, we increased the budget in healthcare by $1.9 billion. That's more than any government in the history of Ontario. We're increasing it even more, billions of dollars to fight COVID-19, making sure that the needs of the healthcare frontline workers are taken care of. And we take a lot of advice, not only through COVID, through our Chief Medical Officer, but also leaders like Dr. Kevin Smith, UHN, incredible. I could name all the CEOs, but we're all working together collaboratively as a team. And there's so many people that I'm so proud of. I could sit here for the next hour and start naming people. So when you work shoulder to shoulder, work together, it's amazing what we can accomplish in the greatest jurisdiction anywhere in the world, right here in Ontario. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you.